Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be reading Chapter 3, the Articles of Confederation in our history textbook. I just want to go ahead and warn you all that my cats are playing around me, so if you hear really loud noises or if they knock over the computer, that's why. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started into Chapter 3, the Articles of Confederation. Meeting in Philadelphia. The Second Continental Congress was the meeting of delegates from all the colonies. It took place in Philadelphia in 1775. Those delegates had been called together to decide what to do about the latest acts of the British government against the colonist liberties. If anybody had told those delegates they would still be meeting 2 years later, few of them would have believed it. But in 1777, there they were. And now they weren't just discussing protests against Parliament, they were in charge of a war for independence, and they would continue meeting for 4 more years, still running that war. The Second Continental Congress was doing something else as well. It was trying to agree on a government for the new United States of America. Most members of the Congress agreed that the new nation needed some kind of central government, a government for the whole nation. Every time they began to consider what kind of government, though, they ran into a problem. That problem was the fear of a central government with too much power. The reason that they were so afraid, and it might get into this, but the reason they were so afraid of a central government was because they were about to go to war or were already at war with a government or a nation that was run by a monarch, and it had a very strong central government system. They did not want that, so they were afraid of it for right now. In 1777, the Congress voted to approve a plan for a new central government. The plan was called the Articles of Confederation, right? And a confederation is a group of states joined together by a... I'm not really sure what that was. But a confederation is a group of states joined together by a formal agreement. Oh my. We're just having all kinds of problems right now. Okay, let me fix this for a moment. There we go. Okay, and it was sent to the states for approval. After being debated in each state, it finally went into effect 4 years later in 1781, when Maryland became the last state to approve it. The Articles of Confederation were very different from the constitutions the states had adopted for themselves. Like the state constitutions, the Articles created a law-making body, which was called Congress. That's where the similarities ended. The people didn't elect the members of Congress the way they elected their state legislatures. Members of Congress were appointed by the states. In fact, the people of the United States had no direct connection with this new central government at all. You see, the new government didn't represent the people, it represented the states, and the states had established their own political independence. You'll see the importance of that difference in a little while. There was another important difference between the Articles of Confederation and the state constitutions. State constitutions gave their legislatures power to do a great many things. The Articles, though, gave Congress power to do very, very few things. These were some of the main powers. Congress could declare war and make peace. You could hardly have one state making peace while the others continue to fight against Great Britain. So, I want to talk about really fast the powers that the central government had under the Articles of Confederation, and it'll get into why these powers and why they had to come up with, why these powers were not the best or thought out to be the best as of the way that they were written, and why we had to create a constitution. So, the central government could declare war and make peace. It could create an army and a navy. However, even though it could create an army and a navy, it was requesting from the states an army and a navy. For example, if it wanted to ask Virginia that it needed 200 troops to be sent to wherever, that was a request. It was not a, you need to do this. And Virginia had the opportunity because of the way that the Articles of Confederation set it up to say no thank you or to ignore the request. This created a lot of problems, of course, whenever we were in the American Revolution. It could send representatives to foreign countries to try and work out treaties or trade agreements. It could borrow money, establish a system of weights and measures, so like what we use today, rulers, measures, all of that, establish post offices, and print money. The Congress could make treaties and alliances with other nations. It could settle arguments between the states about their boundaries, about where one state's land ended and another's began. It could borrow money, set up a postal service, and create a currency or money system. That was about it. To make sure the Congress didn't try to do more than it was supposed to, the Articles of Confederation added this. Unless the Articles specifically gave a power to the new Congress, Congress did not have it. Too little power. How did the Articles of Confederation work out in practice? Unfortunately, not very well. There were many reasons why. For one thing, each state, whether large or small, had only one vote in Congress. That meant that little Rhode Island, with a population of 68,000, had the same vote as Virginia, which had more than 10 times as many people. Some of the larger states became frustrated and felt this voting arrangement was unfair. I want you to think for a moment. I know you can't respond to me because this is a video, but a question that I would ask you in class for you all to discuss would be whether you think that that voting arrangement was unfair or not and why. So if you come to the live sessions this week, I'm going to be asking this question, and I want you to tell me whether you think that is fair or not, or I might post it on Google Classroom for you to respond to. Another problem was that Congress was always broke. During the war, the Continental Congress had borrowed from other countries and from individual Americans to buy supplies and pay the army. With the war over, it was time to start paying the money back. So they were in debt and they needed to pay this money back. Right now, you are probably thinking, why didn't Congress just pass some laws to collect taxes? The reason is that the Articles of Confederation did not allow Congress to tax. Only the state governments could do that. There was that problem about a strong central government again. They didn't want this big government to come in and start taxing them because they just went through a huge war talking with Britain to not do that and fighting Britain to not do that. So they didn't want to finish a war and then go straight into the same ordeal with their own people. Then, how was Congress supposed to get money? All it could do was tell the states how much was needed and then ask each one to contribute its fair share. If they did, fine. If they didn't, then the central government had no power to make them contribute. Not surprisingly, perhaps most didn't. For every $100 Congress asked for, the states contributed just $5. You can't pay off many debts that way. So the central government or Congress had absolutely no power when it came to telling the states that they had to pay back this money. All of the states had been participating in this war, and all of them had a duty to pay back the debts that they owed. Yet whenever Congress asked for this money, requested it, they were only paying a very tiny small portion of that money back. Very tiny. So if you asked for $100 from someone and then they only gave you $5, that's the same amount of money, the same idea that Congress was getting back from the states. They were not able to pay off their debts because this was occurring. Even when it became clear that the central government had to have at least some power to raise money, there was not much that could be done about it. That's because of another weakness of the Articles of Confederation. To amend or change this Constitution, all 13 states had to give their agreement. Twice, those who favored the idea tried to amend the Articles to allow Congress to tax. Each time, 12 states said yes, but one state refused. The amendment failed. So this is very different from our own Congress today. And the reason it's different today is because of this problem that they had during this time. I want you to think back to our classroom. It would be very, very, very difficult to get all 26 of us to agree on the same thing, to say yes to the entire thing. And that's because everyone's different. Everyone has different ideas. They have different thoughts. And so not everyone agrees on the same topic or on the same choice. And so it would be very silly to think that all of the states that we have now, all 50 of them, that every single person in Congress would be able to agree on a decision. It's just not going to happen. And so they had a really big problem with this during this time because they couldn't get anything passed because only 12 would say yes and one would not want to do whatever they were wanting to do. So they had a tough time. They had to change this. While the Articles of Confederation gave Congress the power to declare war, Congress had no power to raise an army. It could ask each state to contribute its fair share of men, but again, it was up to each state to decide whether it would do so. This was a big problem when farmers revolted in Massachusetts in 1786 in Shays' Rebellion. Oop, went back too far. So this is a depiction of Shays' Rebellion. It was an armed revolt against what were considered to be unfair taxes and harsh economic conditions. The governor had to organize a military group to stop the rebels. There were other problems too. The government of the United States of America had no one at its head. After their experience with the king, Americans decided against giving power to any single person. Each year, Congress elected one of its members to be president of the Congress, but that wasn't the same thing as being the head of the whole government. It was just a nice title with no real power. With such a weak central government, states often did whatever they wanted, even though they weren't supposed to. For example, the Articles of Confederation said that Congress had the right to raise a navy, but 9 states went ahead and had navies of their own. So at this point, it kind of just seemed like everyone was doing their own thing and were almost their own country, so to say, and that wasn't going to work long term for this nation. The central government seemed so unimportant that state legislatures took their time electing delegates to Congress. The delegates took even more time getting to its meetings. Some didn't even bother. Americans had been understandably afraid of creating a central government with too much power. But after 6 years under the Articles of Confederation, many people believed they had created one with not enough. So, you're going to have questions that you will respond to, like the one that I mentioned earlier on in the video. That's separate from your actual response questions that I'm going to post. And I really want you to be thinking about the problems that the Articles of Confederation posed and placed on our brand new nation. We had just gotten out of a war with one of the greatest superpowers in the world at the time, and now we weren't even able to run our own government or our own country. We were a little baby country, and our states were acting like they were their own countries in and of themselves. So, the next 2 chapters, so chapter 3 that we just read today and chapter 4, I want you to be thinking about the problems that this Articles of Confederation posed and why it was so important that we had to create our own constitution. So,